The Robots of Death is far better than it has any right to be. This is such a fun and engaging little murder mystery set on a sand miner. It starts off relatively normal, and I did find myself enjoying this story right from the beginning, but everything became much more interesting once somebody actually died rather early on. Because you have this murder mystery in a quite limited setting, you don't know for sure who is behind the murder. It could have been anyone. And what's great about this one is that it has about 100 minutes to really play with this and develop the concept in really interesting ways. I feel like this is one of the stories that is very well suited to the format of Classic Who because it really gets the time to do what it wants to do and have a lot of fun with it. I love the scenes where we see all of these people on the sand miner discussing who might be the murderer. It's all quite engaging, and the dialogue in this one is largely quite solid. A lot of the time with Classic Who, dialogue is not a particularly memorable aspect of the story, particularly if it comes from the supporting cast. But in the case of this one, the supporting characters were really rather solid and most of them got a decent amount to do. And the inherent nature of each of these characters looking out for their own best interests and trying to move the suspicion of the murder to somebody else makes for some quite interesting scenes. It's classic murder mystery storytelling inside a Doctor Who serial, and it is loads of fun. They also do a really good job of having a decent amount of different things going on around the sand miner. You have these different kinds of robots working alongside the humans, and I must say that I really do like the design of these robots and their presence within the story. The design of their faces is great. It's just this blank, expressionless metallic face, and I just love it. It works particularly well when they are being used as a threat of the story. This one is called the Robots of Death for a reason, because there is a robot that does the actual murder this mystery centers around. And I love just the eeriness of this robot as it approaches its target and strangles the man. They are really well used in this story, and they serve more than just one purpose, as naturally, most of them are actually helping the humans. And the way this story unfolds is quite good as well. They do an excellent job at introducing new elements and expanding upon what they've set up already. Naturally, I don't want to get too much into this if you haven't seen the story, but I do want to say that I found this one to be rather well paced out with its progression of events, and it does a masterful job of balancing these more fun and even comedic elements with the more serious and dark aspects of the story, which do crop up throughout. It's just a good mix of different things used very well to tell a compelling story. The Doctor and Leela are back for this serial and they work pretty well, sometimes together, sometimes not. I think Leela is growing on me a little bit. I liked her in the previous story and I think she continues to be good. I like how inquisitive she is. She is not afraid to ask the Doctor questions about things she doesn't understand, and that is a good quality to have. She's also pretty good at looking after herself. Obviously, she carries a weapon with her, and she knows how to use it, so she's, for the most part, well equipped to deal with dangers when they come up.
Not soon enough, though.
I didn't kill him, ask this thing!
And I do enjoy the dynamic of these two characters. I said this before, but it is something a little bit different to what we have seen in the past, and I appreciate when the show does change things up a bit, and I'm glad they're not trying to just recreate the same magic that the Doctor had with Sarah Jane, because I feel pretty confident it wouldn't have worked. The Doctor is good as always. I don't have much more to say about him that hasn't been said before. He's just fun to follow around in these stories and offers some quite comedic moments throughout the serials, while still taking things seriously. There was one moment in which I thought he was a bit too harsh on Leela. After she asks him a couple of questions, he says this.
Where he modified this way. Do you have to talk so much?
Sorry?
Not a huge complaint, but to me it felt like a bit too much of a snap for the Doctor. I think it's okay for him to be brash at times, but this felt a little unnecessary in what was generally a very fun story. And since I pointed out a moment I wasn't too fond of, here is one of his more lighthearted moments that I quite liked to balance it out.
You mean you can't control this machine?
Well, of course I can control it. 9 times out of 10? Well, 7 times out of 10. 5 times, look. Never mind, let's see where we are. You won't need that.
How do you know?
I never carry weapons. If people see you mean them no harm, they never hurt you. 9 times out of 10.
I would also like to note that the direction of this story by Michael E. Bryant is really commendable. The use of models for the exterior of the sand miner looked quite good, better than models usually look, and the way the scenes inside of it are shot is really nice. You get a proper sense of the danger when it is present in the story, and they use some interesting POV shots to add to that presentation. There's also this one shot that starts off in a mirror before pulling back and revealing that we were looking at an inversion of the room, and I always love seeing that. I particularly like seeing neat techniques like that used in older shows like Doctor Who. Although it is a shame that one of the crew was visible in the shot as the camera pulled away from the mirror, but oh well, what are you gonna do? At this point, I do want to get into some spoilers, so you are welcome to skip to the time shown on screen to avoid these spoilers. And with that said, let's continue. I love the robot character of D-84. We are introduced to him in, I believe, the second part of this story, and it's really not clear what his deal is. The story puts you in a very interesting situation of not being certain why he is here, why he can talk, and what his goal is. I thought this character added a little something special to the story, and was honestly my favorite of what was ultimately a really solid supporting cast. He's just a really nice and endearing character who is working to actually help people, as he is one of the 2 underground agents sent by the company that everybody here works for. And it is fun to have him on the Doctor's side towards the end of this serial. He was great, and I thought it was such a shame to see him ultimately die. I do wish that he had been able to make it out of this story alive, and I honestly wouldn't have minded if he joined the TARDIS team for a bit. I think he would have added something a little bit extra to the show, similar to Nardole in New Who, where he isn't the main companion, but it can be nice to have him around for the story. And I only say this because I just liked the character that much.
Now you're going to have to stay here.
I cannot do that.
D-84. This is the final deactivator. If I have to use this and you're around, it'll destroy your brain.
I am not important.
What? I think you're very important.
My duty is to the company.
All right. But you be very careful.
I will.
Good. Come on.
We do ultimately find that the person behind the murders of the crew members is Dask, which honestly wasn't the biggest of surprises to me, but it still worked. I didn't think it was a particularly obvious person to be behind the murders, but early on in the first part, I made a prediction for who I thought was most likely, even though most of them had a fairly reasonable chance, and my prediction was Dask, because he was the character that felt like he was just the right amount involved, and not enough of the suspicion was directed his way, and as it turns out, it was him. Another name the character is referred to as is Taran Capell, which is where we get some of the background of this mystery in learning that he had threatened a robot revolution. And that's basically what his whole deal is. He grew up with robots and wants them to revolt. It is genuinely an interesting backstory for a character, and it doesn't require too much exposition, and most of that is done before we actually find out which person on the ship is definitely Taran Capell. And he works pretty effectively once he is revealed, and I think they spend an appropriate amount of time with the character at the very end, with him staying in the shadows for the bulk of the story. Also, apparently he paints his face to look more like a robot, which is interesting. I almost have no additional commentary to add to that. It's just a very interesting and kind of bizarre choice. He paints his face to look like a robot? Why does he do that?
Like my brothers. The doors. Force them open!
The actual concluding note of this story is as silly as it is smart. They literally defeat this character using helium, which is kind of a really odd thing to do, but I also totally get how it's supposed to work based on what was given in the story. Now, getting into the specifics of how much helium Leela had in that tank, and how much you would have had to fill up the room to make his voice change significantly, I mean, I don't know for sure that it would have worked, but it is a clever solution because it alters his voice in order to trick the robots into killing him. So I do like it, although ultimately, of course, it is a bit silly.
Kill the humans. Kill the humans.
Overall, I had a really good time with this story, and I found it to be thoroughly entertaining. This one saw a great mix of really engaging and fun murder mystery elements, as well as darker and more eerie scenes related to the robots, and the danger they posed to the crew of the sand miner. The Doctor was great, and I found Leela to be quite good as well, working rather nicely with this solid and extensive supporting cast that this serial hosts. I had a genuinely great time with this story, and I am going to give The Robots of Death a rating of 8.75 out of 10. As said, this story feels like it's better than it has any right to be, and I am curious as to what you folks have to say about this one. So be sure to leave your thoughts down below if you want, and that does it for today. I will be joining you again this coming Sunday for a review of the Talons of Weng-Chiang. So I hope you will be around for that, but if not, that is absolutely fine with me, so long as you know that I appreciate your time here today. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.